All right, let me begin with a general overview of the Planet X system, and then I'll talk about the tribulation process, what's going to happen in what event, in how things are going to unfold, and then I'll talk with you about things that you can begin doing so that you can get through this time. Before I start, what I do want you to know is that where you're located is in a central area in Europe, and actually that is probably one of the more survivable areas on the European continent. So you're in good shape there. The only thing that you're going to really have to worry about will be people in panic wanting to steal whatever supplies that you have, and some other issues, but I'll get into that in a little bit. First off, let's talk about what is Planet X, and because we always hear a lot of different names for it. We hear Wormwood, we hear Destroyer, Hercolobus, Frightener, several other names. The reason why you have all these names is that there is a good deal of historical literature on this object, and it is known by different names. The oldest would be the Destroyer, which is what the ancient Egyptians called it and what the ancient Hebrews called it. And this was in a book, called the Colburn Bible. And they describe its last flyby, which was the plagues of Exodus, in extreme detail. Extreme detail. There is nothing, the Egyptians wrote this, and it reads like a man on the street interview. It's very detailed. And, it tells us harbinger signs of what's coming and what will happen. And actually, the interesting thing is the ancient Egyptians are describing 3,600 years ago exactly the things that we're seeing now in the sky, and all of the observation videos that are on YouTube. And what it says is that this system hides behind the sun, darting in and out, and then suddenly it comes into full view. So what is this system, and how does it come into full view? First off, what you have to understand is that we live in a binary star system. We do not have one sun, we have two suns. And actually, if a recent discovery by the astronomers in Chile is correct, we could be in a trinary sun system where we have three suns. Now, is this common? Yes, 90% of all solar systems in our galaxy have more than one sun. So having one sun is a 1 in 10 chance. So what is the argument for us living in a solar system where we only have one sun? Well, let's look just at what we have with Earth. Our axis is tilted, and relative to the sun, you look at a planet like Uranus, and it's totally tilted 90 degrees so that its north pole faces the sun. If you only have one sun, what is causing planets to tilt on their north-south axis? All right. Now, we all have heard the song, if you're my age, and Aquarius, all right, about, we're going in, this is the age of Aquarius, the age of Aquarius. And that was an old song back from the 70s, and very popular in its day. Well, yes, we're going into the age of Aquarius, but we're going backwards into the age of Aquarius, not forwards. And we're doing so at an ever-increasing speed. So there has to be a constant that is used. Well, again, if we're in a single star solar system, why are we going backwards into the age of Aquarius instead of going forwards? And why is there a need for an astronomical constant? All right. So if you just look at the different behavioral aspects of our own solar system, you can see that we really do have multiple suns. Now, this sun is a red dwarf. Red dwarfs, as I write about it in my book, Being in It for the Species, are born in great stellar nurseries and go out into space, and they are then attracted into the orbits of larger suns. Now, is there this possibility that you have all of these suns roaming around looking for a place to park themselves? Well, what astronomers are now telling us is that rogue planets, all right, or in this case you could even say a rogue sun, but just rogue planets, there are as many rogue planets floating freely out in deep space with no sun to pull them into an orbit, and there are as many of these as there are stars in the sky. So this is the way our universe works. And this second sun to our sun soul is called Nemesis. And it is a brown dwarf star. Brown dwarfs are actually more common in our galaxy than our own sun. It's an incredibly common star. But it has only been in the last few decades that we have discovered brown dwarfs. And the reason why is that they are very, very dark. So why are brown dwarf stars like Nemesis, the second sun in our solar system, why is it so dark? It is because it has sufficient mass to ignite like our sun did. But it doesn't have enough mass to, if you will, maintain a nuclear furnace. So our sun is continuing, it ignited and continues to burn brightly. But a brown dwarf ignites and then begins dying off. And, you know, think about a campfire and you have a piece of charcoal in the fire pit and it turns white. It gives off a lot of heat. Then very slowly, you know, it's banking off, and yeah, you go to bed and you're still getting warmth off that big piece of charcoal that's still banking off through the night. All right. Well, in cosmic terms, the process takes billions of years. All right. Just not an evening. Well, that's how a brown dwarf operates. It ignites, but doesn't continue to burn like our sun, slowly banking off ever so slowly. Now, because a brown dwarf does not stay bright like our sun, what happens is that there's a tremendous amount of dust and debris, ejecta, that is thrown around it when it ignites. And so that does not get burned up. It just remains out there. And these things go through space shrouded in huge, vast clouds of this heavy cosmic iron-laden dust. Now, can you see these stars? Because there's so much dust around them, you cannot see them until they're close enough to another star that they are lit up. You know, think about, for example, amateur astronomers who are scanning the night sky looking for comets. When are they going to see those comets? They're going to see those comets when they're inside the orbit of Jupiter. And that's when they become close enough to the sun that there's enough light on them that next thing you know, they start outgassing. And that is what causes, there's two tails that are going to come off of a comet. One is very dark and difficult to see, and that's its dust tail. And that's going to follow in the comet's orbit. But the gas tail is going to go directly away from the sun because it's solar wind that's pushing it that way, and it's solar wind that's causing the outgassing to make the comet bright. So, in our case, we have to wait until our second sun, Nemesis, is like a comet. It's going to be close enough to our sun to be lit up so that we can see it with our own eyes in the visible light spectrum. However, when these dark stars are out in further away, they are yet observable, but in infrared, not in the visible light spectrum. If you look at the whole light spectrum, what we can see of it with our eyes is very, very tiny. Very, very tiny. But then you get into infrared, and a lot more things are possible because now you're seeing the heat. And in that case, brown dwarf stars stand out like a sore thumb. Boom. They come right up, and you can't miss them. Now, the first time the Nemesis was imaged with an infrared telescope was in 1983 with IRAS. IRAS was a satellite observatory that was put into space to map the Milky Way. And actually what they did was, it was out there to go find what the earlier Pioneer probes had confirmed. The earlier Pioneer probes had confirmed there's something out here, something big. Well, with IRAS, what they did was they were able to image Nemesis. Now, once they found it, and they imaged it, and by the way, IRAS was something that was operated by both NASA and ESA, the European Space Agency. And what NASA said was that the coolant system on board for the infrared camera had failed. And so the spacecraft could still be navigated and send telemetry and things like that, but it couldn't send images because the camera had shut down. Well, we've had several whistleblowers who have seen the official files in the military, and they say that's absolute nonsense. What really happened in 1983 was that as soon as NASA saw that, they published that cover story so they could continue making the IRAS satellite track Nemesis. They wanted to create what we call an ephemeris, and that is, an ephemeris is going to tell you where that object is going and where it's going to be at certain points along the way. Very, very, very similar to a train schedule or a subway schedule, and you can go, there's my subway, I'm on the blue line, and it'll be here, and then 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 it'll be here. And so you know where to look for it. In the process of doing that, NASA expended all of the remaining navigation fuel on board the IRAS, and then it became totally inoperable, and that was the end of it. But they used it for a tremendous amount of visual observation. Then the next time they did something along that line was, and at Your Own World USA, we broke the story in 2006, the South Pole Telescope. And the South Pole Telescope was a sub-millimeter infrared array, or infrared dish, very, very sophisticated. Precisely the instrument, you would want to view something coming up from the south and locate it in precisely the right place to do that. There is a stated scientific reason for the South Pole Telescope, which is at the Scott Edmondson Station. Well, that scientific reason is nonsense, because the exact same science could have been performed in southern Chile for 10 cents on the dollar, 20 cents on the dollar, a lot less. You know, why did they have to build a telescope in the most inhospitable terrain and climate on the planet? And they didn't get to truck it in or go in with rail cars. They had to fly it in with a fleet of C-130 aircraft. We're talking about moving that much equipment in for the size of this thing and the support building that's with it. You know, this is on the scale of a Berlin airlift. So it was extremely expensive. Well, in 2008, 2 disclosure videos came out of that facility, and both of those showed Nemesis and the planets orbiting around it. So it's what we call a mini constellation. And Nemesis has its own planets. This information was relayed by 2 different whistleblowers. The first one was someone who was working there, involved with the project, or at Scott Edmondson. The second one was a friend of someone who was involved down there. In both cases, the YouTube videos were literally stomped out of existence by the federal government, smashed them down really fast, put up all kinds of, you know, they'll hijack an account and then they'll put up pornography on it, you know, all kinds of ugly things to discredit it, dismiss it, make it look poor to people who are just coming around. But I knew what I knew because I was tipped off in advance with both of those by whistleblower sources in the government, and I do not reveal sources. What we're seeing now in the sky is just, you know, I'm just getting flooded with observation reports on YouTube from people that are posting excellent videos. We've posted quite a few videos over the years with a lot of image analysis, and people are welcome to take a look at that. So now let's talk about the celestial mechanics, if you will, of this. And what you have is this mini constellation. It very much is like a miniature solar system inside our own solar system. And it is coming up from the south. It is in a steeply inclined orbit, about 30 degrees relative to the ecliptic. So we need to define the word ecliptic, because we tend to think that our horizon that we see the sky from is the actual north and south that is the same for our sun. It is not. Remember, we're tilted on our axis. Now, the ecliptic, imagine we start with a tiny little point right in the center of the sun, and then we take and expand a concentric ring outwards towards the 12 constellations of the zodiac, all right? And when we do that, now what we have is the ecliptic. And the southern skies are below the ecliptic, and the northern skies are above it. And right in the middle is the sun's equator. Now, when you're looking at Planet X and talking about it, you always have to remember that we have to speak about it relative to the ecliptic, not to how things look from our backyards here on Earth, because we're tilted on our axis. All right. So here we have the ecliptic, and this system is coming up from the southern skies and it's inclined. In other words, it's not level with the ecliptic like we are. All of the major planets in our system are on or very near the ecliptic. This one's coming up from the south, and it's in a comet-like orbit, very similar to Hale-Bopp, because it's coming up inclined, and where we move counterclockwise around the sun, it's going clockwise around the sun. And so it's moving in the opposite direction around the sun than we are. But it's also orbiting the sun at the same time, like any of the planets in our system. And it's a corkscrew effect. And a simplistic way to look at it is, imagine you're on a carousel ride at the carnival, and you're on the wooden horse, and the carousel is going around and around and around, okay? And there you are in your horse, and you're going up and down, up and down, up and down. And the carousel is going around and around, and you're going up and down, all right? So the point here is you're moving on two axes. And that's the same thing that's happening with this system. And the reason why it tends to linger behind the sun for us right now, as the ancient Egyptians reported it was doing back in the Exodus time, is that we go around the sun about every 365 days. It does the same thing, 380 days. So what we're literally in opposing orbits here as we're moving around, and it's still, so it's rising up, and yet it's rising up and rotating around the sun at the same time. And that's the reason why it kind of, it boggles the mind. It's difficult to conceptualize it, that you have this object that's moving in a very strange way. But if you compare it with comets, it's behaving like a comet, all right? That's really what the orbit is like. Now, when does this object become a problem for us here on Earth? Well, this is going to be after it rises up from below the ecliptic and then crosses the ecliptic into the northern skies. Once it does that, once it crosses up into the northern skies, get your guest room ready, folks. Hell's coming to visit, and it's a long stay. And this process is going to take about 3.5 years for it to make this northern sky transit. And when it does, it is going to have all kinds of horrific implications for us here on Earth. Now, we're already beginning to see that. If you go to our website, yowusa.com, what you will see is that we have science articles documenting what's happening on the planet. We started the science article over a year ago, and when we first started doing signs, it would take us about a month and a half to 2 months to pull together significant trends. All right, increases in something, increases in this, increases in that. Things that we've never seen before. At this point, the trend has gone so intensive that we are no longer publishing science articles every 2 months. We have to do them every 2 weeks. That is how intensive things are right now. And while we're talking about the signs of, we're talking about, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, meteors, all types of bizarre phenomena. It's all out there, and it's extremely well documented, so I'd really suggest and urge all of you who have any second thoughts about it to read the Science articles. An important thing also to note is that there's a tremendous amount of collusion and cover-up in the mainstream media, the large outlets. They will not report much of this. When they do report it, they trivialize it, they localize it, they dismiss it. They don't want people connecting the dots to understand that something major is happening with our planet. Now, was this foreseen? Well, you know, everybody remembers December 21, 2012, the Mayan calendar. And everyone talks about it as a total fiasco, and it was a stampede, and people were made to look stupid and foolish, and all of that. Well, we revisited December 21, 2012, and in an article on our site, were the Mayans using Anunnaki knowledge. And here's the interesting thing about prophecy. Prophecy, good prophecy, always has two components: a harbinger and an event. And the harbinger is a warning, signs that you can see that the prophecy is about to come to pass, that the event will occur and the prophecy will be fulfilled. So, were the Mayans looking for a harbinger on December 21, 2012, or were they looking for an event? Well, if they were looking for an event, that seems a bit redundant. Why do you need to look up at the sky for some sort of celestial alignment on the very day your empire is crumbling about you? You're probably going to be a little busy doing other things. On the other hand, if you observe that harbinger date, you have time to prepare, time to adapt. You know, go to the Bible, the biblical story of Joseph and the dream of Pharaoh's dream of 7 lean cows and 7 fat cows. That was a harbinger. Excellent example of a harbinger. And they were able to do something, and Egypt got through that. So, if the Mayans were then looking for a harbinger, a celestial alignment that would tell them, yeah, it's going to get bad. Bad time's coming. Well, that's what they were looking for. Because what we did was we started saying, if it is a harbinger that they were looking for, then following that harbinger alignment, we would see significant increases in different types of empirical data, scientific data, data you can take to the bank. Well, we started looking at we saw trends in a wide range of data sets, but we focused our attention on 2. One was meteors and one was earthquakes, because if you have something that's approaching, it's going to be pushing things in front of it. And if it's approaching, it's going to be interacting with the sun. And because the sun is interacting with it, we are getting a byproduct. Our Earth is being affected as well by this interaction between these 2 celestial objects in space, these 2 suns, Sol and its companion. And so here we are, and we started looking at it. And what we saw in the data simply stunned us. Stunned us. It was like getting hit in the face with a dead fish. I am serious. December 21, 2012. Meteors, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, slow increase, slow increase, slow increase, right after December, right exactly after December 21, 2012, boom, up like a skyrocket. And it hasn't stopped. It keeps skyrocketing, and it keeps skyrocketing, and it keeps skyrocketing. Now we're seeing fireballs and meteors reported in the United States and Canada as never before. Around the world, buildings and homes are exploding. This is something new. How do you have all of these buildings and houses exploding and people dying from this when we didn't see this normally before? And of course, it's always attributed to a gas main or something like that. But the frequency of it, there's no explanation for the frequency of it other than meteors impacting these homes and blowing them up, landing like little bombs. Pow! And that's what people are reporting in a lot of these instances, that they hear these sounds like an impact, and then boom, the house explodes. And many people have died. So also we look at earthquakes. Same thing with earthquakes. Right after December 21, 2012, boom, starts its just skyrocketing. And it continues to skyrocket. Now, what I will tell you is our government has been very devious in the way it is trying to cover up this trend. If you look at earthquakes are reported elsewhere in the world, our USGS immediately will come out and downgrade those. So if somebody else says it's a 5.1, they say it's a 4.8. If someone else says it's a 5.2, they say it's a 4.9. But what they're always doing is they're always pushing it down, pushing it down, pushing it down, pushing it down. So when we look at overall earthquakes of all magnitudes, we see this astronomical rise, just astronomical. But what the government does is says all earthquakes magnitude 5 or greater. No, not such a big thing. All right, and that is how they're fooling the public. They're cooking the books. They're lying through their teeth. Now, I'm very sad that our government is lying to people and suppressing the truth of what is happening. It shames me as an American to live in a country where our own government is so devious. So, why are they devious? All right, well, governments are owned by banks, and banks are owned by the people who own the world. Think about it. 8 people have as much combined wealth as the bottom 3.5 billion souls on the planet. Friends, we live on this is a slave planet. We're slaves. Some of us are pampered. We get to live in the master's house. The rest of us work the fields, and life's brutal. And for the elites, it's real simple. They don't want people preparing. What they want is to reduce the population on the planet. And I'm talking about by about 90%. That's right. If there are 10 people in the room that I am talking to right now, one of you is going to come out of this alive, and the other 9 of you are going to die, and most likely you're going to die badly. That's the simple truth of it. So there is, I see no reason to call people sheeple and other derogatory terms because they're in denial and they won't look at it. I see all of the heavy programming. And the government wants people to die in place. Not only the American government, but a lot of other governments around the world. They want people to die in place. And that's not terribly difficult, folks, because most of humanity lives along a coastline. And what we are going to have are going to be mile-high, kilometer-high tsunamis tearing through the coastlands. And being inland is not going to be all that safe for those who are living in London and Paris. That water will come right up the rivers, and those towns are going to be just simply inundated and destroyed by the flooding. So, that's the reason why I say you're in Prague, you're far enough inland that you'll do better with all of that. So, let's talk about what's going to happen, what are the sequences that are going to happen, and because this is important, this is very important in terms of long-term survivability. The first thing you're probably going to see is this trend right now where we have this massive increase in volcanism since December 21, 2012 is going to actually kick into gear much higher. The most likely affected area is going to be the Ring of Fire along the Pacific Ocean. And the region where the impact is going to be greatest will be in the Orient. It'll shut down. When you see so many volcanoes, and this is already beginning to happen, by the way. We're already having volcanoes that are erupting and causing airports to shut down. Jets and ash, volcanic ash, do not mix. Jets cannot fly through it and survive. And when you start seeing entire regions in the Orient that are shutting down their airports because there's so much volcanic ash in the sky, then that is your harbinger sign, ladies and gentlemen. When you see that, get off your ass and do something. Enough said. Now, what will follow that, and that harbinger event, it'll cause businesses to fail, food prices are going to go up in the store, your shelves are going to be a little empty because food that's normally exporting out to the rest of the world from that region they're not going to be able to do that. Their agricultural systems are going to be inundated with ash, and they're going to be importing food like crazy. So, there's going to be massive profit taking, and again, you'll see shortages on the shelf. Depending where you are and prevailing winds, there'll be some ash that'll fall and it'll be on your windshield on your car in the morning, things like that. But just-in-time manufacturing is going to close down. Another thing that'll happen is there will be a major shift of power in that area because the United States is dominant force right now. But the United States relies on air power. It uses land-based bombers and naval, aircraft carriers with squadrons of fighter bombers and jets and so forth. All of this is air power. Air power will be completely shut down during this process. You look at China with their massive buildup and increase in their military, what they're really going towards is the Soviet strategy of missile boats, cruisers, and submarines. And these type of vessels will operate in those conditions very easily. So there will be a shift of power balance in the Orient, and China will then become the dominant leader in that area. So you'll see all of these signs. When you're seeing all of this happen, get off your ass and do something. The next thing that's going to happen will be impact events, major impact events. Houses exploding all around the world. This is the minor stuff that's happening in advance. This is like the circus coming to town. And the first thing you see are the twirlers and the clowns and then the unicorns and then, finally come the elephants. And at the end of it is the guys with the shovel cleaning up after the elephants. So, right now we're getting the batons and what have you, but the elephants are going to come. And that's when we're going to have major impact events happening. And when that happens, those tsunamis that are generated, because keep in mind 70% of the surface of the planet is water. So that's where it's most likely we're going to see these impacts. And those are going to send tsunami waves that are going to just simply devastate entire coastlines. Now, after that, the next major thing that's going to happen will be the pole shift event. The pole shift is going to cause the greatest loss of life of all the disasters that are going to happen in the tribulation sequence. It's the pole shift that's going to be the big killer. Because what will happen is the Nemesis and its planets, and let me just review that quickly, I didn't do that before. Nemesis has 3 major planets. It has Helion, which is a gaseous bright planet, looks like a second smaller star, if you will, to Nemesis. Then there's a rocky planet, second outermost ring, and that's Arbota. And then the furthest major planet out from the system is NIBIRU, which is extensively documented by Zachariah Sitchin. And that is the homeworld of the Anunnaki. And then it has its own moon, which we named Farada. And Helion has its own moon, which we named Harrington. This system is going to be coming around, arcing around the sun. We're going to be closing with it, and we're going to be passing by it as it's going back into the southern skies. Unfortunately, we are going to be between the sun and Nemesis when this is happening. And Nibiru, which is its furthest most planet, is actually going to come between us and Venus. Nemesis will pass between Mars and Jupiter. And the result of having all of these celestial bodies in the same place at the same time is that they're going to put gravitational forces on our planet that are going to be absolutely mind-boggling. Let's put this in perspective. Let's theoretically, hypothetically say, what happens if tomorrow our moon disappeared? What would be the result for Earth? Well, our moon has more gravitational hold on us than the sun does. And if the moon disappeared tomorrow, the entire surface of planet Earth would sink 18 inches. That would be an extinction level event. That's it. Humanity gone. Just like that. So now we have all of these objects, and all of the planets in the system, in the Nemesis system, are 3 to 6 times the size of the Earth. These are large objects. So they're coming through, and what will happen is that Nemesis, well, all of its major planets, the 3 major planets, 4 objects, are going to gain what we call a lithosphere lock on Earth. That will be Lurch Day. By that time, we're not going to see them because the sky is just going to be so full of ash and smoke and gosh, what else, that we're not going to be able to see what's happening in the skies. But when that Lurch Day happens, everyone on the face of the planet, every soul is going to feel Earth literally shake and quiver. For those of you who go to chiropractors, you know, you get a nice neck adjustment, crack, like that. We're talking about everyone's going to get a good feel of that lurch. And when that happens, Earth's, which is spinning on its axis, is going to start slowing. And our magnetosphere, which is our solar weather shield, is going to be diminishing. This is a time when you need to be underground, 8 to 10 feet of dirt over your head. If you're on the surface, you are the poodle in the microwave oven. You will get roasted. And what will happen is that as this is happening, we're going to have what the Bible calls the days of darkness. This is when NIBIRU eclipses the sun. Now, it's not like when we have a lunar eclipse. We get that beautiful little corona around the edge of the moon. No. When NIBIRU passes between us and Venus, everything is going to be black. Blacker than we could have ever imagined. It's going to be horrifying. And while that's happening, the Earth is going to be in complete and utter chaos. 400 kilometer an hour, 500 kilometer an hour winds, earthquakes, volcanoes, everything that you could imagine. And we're going to have all of the major bodies of waters are going to come out of their basins. And we are going to see massive amounts of flooding and tsunamis, more than you could possibly imagine. Now, then Earth will actually come to a full stop. And then it's going to begin spinning slowly in the opposite direction, gaining speed, as the Nemesis system goes into the southern skies. And so when we are finished with the pole shift, what will happen is that we will see the sun rising in the west, not in the east. And there could be other things as well. Is there any historical basis for such a dire thing? Well, read the story of Noah and the flood, all right? And then look at all of the stories that are told about it. There are hundreds of stories about the great deluge. Noah exists in the cultures of many different peoples across the world because this was a global phenomenon. And what we see is a consistent pattern in all of these stories. The deluge story is that the Noah, or as in the case of the Colburn Bible of Sesuda and Hanok and so many others, the ark is built on the side of a mountain. Now, and this is after strange visitors come to say, this danger is coming, this is what you must do. So why does Noah build his ark on the side of a mountain? You know, if we think in modern terms, an investment banker would say, build your ark down in the harbor. And then, if your ridiculous disaster does not happen, guess what? Convert your ark into a casino, hotel, and a restaurant, and get rich. Be smart, be practical. Well, if Noah had thought like bankers, what would have happened? Well, the deluge was actually one of these, was a pole shift event where the waters came out of their basins, and sitting in the harbor looking up at a 2-kilometer high wall of water, what would have happened? The ark just would have been tumbled end over end over end and shredded. Just shredded to toothpicks, like hydraulic sandpaper. and that would have been the end of it. But no, the ark was built inland on the side of a mountain, so now there's a different story, because you have this huge wall of water coming in. And it's crossing the land and losing energy because now it's going out of its basin onto dry land. And what happens by the time this 2-kilometer high tsunami reaches the ark, it's ebbing. And instead of the water slamming in with brutal force and crushing the ark, it comes in gently underneath the keel, lifting the ark off its chokes and then pulling it out to sea. So, what we're going to have for a disaster is going to be comparable to Noah's flood. You might want to read that again. And look at some of the other ancient accounts in many different cultures all across the globe. Now, after that happens, is there something else? Yes. We transit the tail. And this is going to be a very sad thing because a lot of people, for those of you who are familiar with Mother Shipton, in her prophecy, she says that, you know, this object comes through, passes, and we all go, ha-ha, yippee, we're good, life's great, you know, here you go. And then what happens? Mother Shipton says it comes back and snaps its tail on the earth. Very accurate description, because that's what will happen. It will snap its tail. We're going to fly through this huge tail of iron dust and small objects, and what we're going to have is all of the surface waters on the planet are going to be poisoned. We're going to get bombarded with meteorite showers. It'll be from the, you know, a good way to look at it is in the plagues of Exodus, the first one is the waters turn blood red. That'll be from the iron dust. But also there'll be shrubbercite in the tail of the Nemesis system. And that is going to be a food feast for blue-green algae, all right, the phosphorus. And so consequently, we're going to see massive algae blooms. And then the algae first, you know, and then the water will turn from red to green. And then back to red again. I mean, it'll be disgusting. The algae release very potent toxin, microcystin. So fish will die. Frogs will get out of the water. This toxin is so powerful it can kill human beings. It can kill cattle. It's that powerful. And so for those that are not prepared for this last insult from the Planet X system, it's going to be a terrible time of woe and misery. Woe and misery. But for those who do survive it all towards the end of this period, this is when the elites are going to come up from their vast number of underground bases that they have built around the world. And they're going to say, look at what we have for you. We have warehouses full of seeds, medicines, construction materials, food, everything you ever want, everything you could ever need. All of this is yours. All of this is yours for a price. You take the chip. You take the chip. And that's when people are going to be getting injected with RFID tags And it'll be 3 principal technologies: injection into the hand. There'll be a thermal imprint on the forehead that'll dissolve into the skin. And then for infants, in the soft skull tissue and their top of their heads, before their heads harden up after they're born, they'll have an implant there. When that one's in, there's no way to get it out. Now they're going to tell us these are transponders, just to help folks see where everyone's at, so that things can be allocated smartly and that people can be found and helped, and all types of really great sounding reasons. It's lies. Yeah, there'll be transponders, but these are multiplexing, multi-mode, multi-frequency transceivers. And they're going to send and receive tremendous amounts of information. The elites will be able to put new satellites into the sky to beam down programming. Anyone who's taken a chip is going to have a very pleasant life experience. It's going to be like being on Prozac or Soma. Everything's wonderful. Doesn't matter how bad it is. Because you're not going to have enough energy for a real emotion. You're just going to be there, la la land. And what's even more devastating about it is that they have isolated the God frequency. For those of us who feel we have a connection with Creator and we speak to Creator, what they're going to do is they're going to actually use that chip. Now remember, human body puts out enough energy to light a 100-watt light bulb. That's a lot. And so they can create a force field from these RFID implants in our bodies so that we block out our connection to Creator. And at that point, we're stupid, happy, and godless. In other words, we are perfect as slaves. So, all that I do, all that I care about, all that I strive for is one moment in time. One moment in time that enough people who have had the benefit of self-sufficiency knowledge, that they know they're not alone, that they know that there's hope for the future, that these people will stand up in enough numbers and say to the elites, no, we will not take the chip. And enough of them do, and you don't need everybody to do it. The American Revolution was won with only 30% of the population. The other 70% were either helping the British or sitting on the sidelines. So, if just 30% of the people just say no, understanding they're not saying no to the carrot, they're saying no to the stick, that there will be a painful consequence. But if they do that, then what happens? Then that whole scheme to enslave us as a species fails. And then we can evolve as God intends for us to evolve, and we will have a Star Trek future. And there will be a bright and beautiful day for humanity. And for those of you listening to me today, some of you may be fortunate enough to see that. I sure hope I am. How do you prepare for all of that? Well, most important thing is you've got to have some good underground situation for yourself. And you need to work with like-minded others. All of these things I describe in my book, Surviving the Planet X Tribulation, a Faith-Based Leadership Guide. And this will be releasing either August 1st or August 15th, depending on when the distributors slot us into the market. but it will be coming out shortly. And I address all of these issues in my new book. That concludes my presentation. We can now move to questions and answers.
Do you have some question for Marshall? Or do you have some questions for Marshall? Or
are you there, Alexandra? Hello?
You could.
Hello?
Marshall, I will give a microphone to...
Okay.
So, just a moment.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, there's a big echo, but I can hear.
Okay, I have one question. So you were talking about Ring of Fire. Can you say something more about it? Where is this gonna be, this Ring of Fire?
The Ring of Fire.
The Ring of Fire?
Where it
okay.
is.
Yeah, you'll have to, I can hear her, but the echo is so strong, it's really difficult for me to follow.
Can you hear me, Marshall?
I can hear you, Alexandra, yes.
I can take the questions and come back to you. I will take the questions and come back to you.
Okay,
just a moment,
by.
Just a second. It's if you see the west of United States, Canada, it's called Ring of Fire, where the Earth. Okay. Marshall,
yes.
The first question, where is Ring of Fire? And then if you could say, where are the worst places on Earth that the flyby of NIBIRU will take the worst devastation? If you could say something about it, the safe locations.
The Ring of Fire, but also we will see Vesuvius and Etna. We're going to see devastating eruptions there as well. The Ring of Fire is just on the surface of the planet, is an area that has always been the most intense. So you're going to have to be prepared for seeing a lot of activity along the Ring of Fire. And you know, we're tracking the earthquakes, and we're tracking the volcanic eruptions, and it's just, you know, the trend is just going up and up and up and up and up. In general, what I tell people is you want to be at least 150 miles away from a major body of water at an altitude of 2,500 feet, or about 2,000 kilometers above sea level. And that is a rule of thumb that I use when I'm helping folks with relocation analysis. But, you know, is there any one particular worst hit places? Anything with the shoreline. Anything with the shoreline.
Thank you, Marshall. I will take contact with you evening's time today, tomorrow morning, and if I hear some other questions, I could tell you, and we could inform the audience. Here is Oh, sorry. Here is Harald Kautz, that one of the speakers. Here is Harald Kautz, one of the speakers that want to ask you a question.
Okay.
I just wanted to ask, do you have some nice photographs of the system that you can share via screen? Skype can kind of show not only you speaking but also share your desktop. So could you display some pictures that are serious? Because there was so much fake out there. I'm really curious to see the real McCoy once.
Marshall, could you hear that Harald asked you if you could show some good pictures? Because there was so much disinformation and pictures that were not really... So do you have some good pictures, or could you tell us where we can see them on your page? Or?
Okay, you wanted to see pictures of... I wasn't quite making that out.
I guess it was some good pictures of NIBIRU. The infrared pictures, if you have some good...
pictures, in other words, from in the book that I'm doing, I have 140 illustrations, but these are describing celestial mechanics and tribulation events. But actual pictures of what's going on, the best thing to do is all you have to do, I've reported several of these on my website in videos, and your audience can go to my site at yowusa.com and click on the video links and just look at the different videos that are there. I see, I could show you one that is, let me see here. Let me go. Here's one that I'm actually studying today. I can't say anything about it, but I'm interested in it because the researcher does a very good job of showing this. And let me do this. There you go. So you should be able to see that he has painted out several objects. None of these are the moon. So this is a good example of this is an excellent example of really, I see so many of these being reported. So I am going to work on an analysis of a lot of these videos that I'm seeing, and I'm going to do a video to put them up and to show people how I analyze them and what my thoughts are about these things. So what we're seeing a lot of images now, keep in mind folks, is that chemtrail spraying, which is very heavy right now, makes it difficult for these to see what's happening out in space, especially close to the sun. The images that I find stronger and more compelling are the ones that are taken at altitude by passengers on commercial jets, and those to me are much more useful when they're up at 20, 25,000, 30,000 feet. They're well above the chemtrail layer, they have, you know, they're above the haze, much clearer sky, and so we can get an image that's really excellent. But this is an example of what you see here, and this could be multiple objects. You know, over here, if you look in the far right-hand corner, there's a lot. This pattern of this reddish pattern tends to be prevalent in a lot of pictures today. So this is one I'm studying, and
that's what I'm sort of finding out of you. But these two are close,
so you know, you have that. Let's see here. Here's something somebody put up, and Nick Thomas. Here's something that we have seen a lot of. Now, this is interesting. Let me comment on this. We have an object, and we've been seeing a lot of objects, observation reports where the object is at the 3 o'clock position. But what I think is really important is to look and see that you have a reflection on the water from this object. You have a reflection on the water, and you also have backlighting on the hills, you know, with similar to what you see with the sun here. So this would be another one that I think is an interesting picture, and amongst the ones that are doing, and you know, I'll be taking them from Nick Thomas and some of the others. And so those are a couple of good pictures. Let me just go and here's my website. For those of you who want to, you go into where it says videos, Planet X updates. And my last one, I have two folks that observed the same object in the same place in the sky. And one is Glenn Vaughn, who was a digital camera instructor, and another one which was Huffman area, you know. So if you just take and you know, so this is, there's me giving an interview. But we're talking about a montage of all of the different things. Here we go. There it is. This video observation. So this is where she spotted an object, and we had another one from Glenn Vaughn, same exact area of the sky, same alignment. So, and this one, Melissa Hoffman's video, got over, I think it got over 1 million views. So it was really huge. I would strongly suggest everybody just go to my website and go look at my videos. I have been putting up images, my gosh, I mean, I first reported them in 2008. We had Turrialba webcam we followed through 2013. You know, folks, this is like UFOs, okay? Everybody just, you can have piles and piles and piles upon piles upon piles upon piles and upon piles of pictures and personal reports and all kinds of things, and people go, I don't know about this. It's human denial. But I can tell you one thing, folks. If what you're looking for is absolute positive proof that this is what's happening, if that's what you're really looking for, well, guess what? You're going to see it just before you die.
One question. One question.
So for those of you out there in the audience that want to procrastinate, waste your life.
You said
That's what you're doing. You're just wasting your life.
You said it.
Next question.
You said it is coming in at 30 degrees. Not in the plane, but from 30 degrees. How can it be seen next to the sun if it comes from
Alexandra, if you could repeat the question for me. The echo's very strong on this side.
How can we see it behind the sun? How can it be seen from next to the sun when it's coming from 30 degrees? How can you see it?
Everything is very close to the sun, which means you can only see it near sunrise or sunset, and it's going to depend, your viewing sky is going to depend if you are where there's a lot, if you're where there's a lot of haze or chemtrail spraying, that's going to affect it. This is something that it's difficult to observe right now, mostly because of the chemtrail spraying, which is very, very thick. So, and it does block a lot of sunlight. The chemtrail spraying they're doing, it's, you know, it's actually terraforming. They're changing the planet. So, but again, you know, it's looking, and we find that the webcams that are in high latitudes or around the equator or near the equator, we do better. If it's at altitude, we do better. But there's already a lot of, I showed you things that are, you know, very strong, very good proof. But again, people aren't going to believe it until they see it with their own two eyes. And I think this really gets to it. A point I like to make is, if what you're saying is, I'm not going to believe it until I see it with my own two eyes, then you're stupid and you deserve to die. Because there's a right question. There is a correct question. There is a proper question. And that question is, when will I believe that what I am seeing with my own two eyes is a clear and present danger? That's the right question. Everybody else says, oh, I wonder, what am I going to see with my own eyes? When am I going to see with my own eyes? They're stupid and they're going to die. Because when they're seeing it with their own eyes, they're going to go immediately and see what are they saying on BBC and CNN and all these other news sources. They're going to say, don't worry, it's just an interesting light show. Don't worry. Stay where you are. Die in place. So the real smart question is, when will I believe what I am seeing with my own two eyes is a clear and present danger? And if you're asking that question, you deserve to live. As for the rest, mainstream media is going to lead them to their death, because the elites control the media, and that's what they want. They want as many people to die as possible. They want to depopulate the world. They can be, you know, they can live like kings and queens in the lap of luxury with 10% of the current global population very nicely. And much easier to enslave that fewer people. Next question.
Marshall, we are out of time. So
okay.
If there are more questions, I will take them and I will write to you, and we can still communicate afterwards. And
okay.
Thank you so very much.
You're welcome.
I will take contact with you tomorrow morning. Thank
okay.
you. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Good night now. There are as many rogue planets floating freely out in deep space with no sun to pull them into an orbit And there are as many of these as there are stars in the sky. So, this is the way our universe works. And this second sun to our sun's soul is called Nemesis. And it is a brown dwarf star. Brown dwarfs are actually more common in our galaxy than our own sun. It's an incredibly common star, but it has only been in the last few decades that we have discovered brown dwarfs. And the reason why is that they are very, very dark. So why are brown dwarf stars like Nemesis, the second sun in our solar system, why is it so dark? It is because it has sufficient mass to ignite like our sun did, but it doesn't have enough mass to, if you will, maintain a nuclear furnace. So our sun is continuing, it ignited and continues to burn brightly. But a brown dwarf ignites and then begins literature on this object. And it is known by different names. The oldest would be the destroyer, which is what the ancient Egyptians called it and what the ancient Hebrews called it. And this was in a book, called the Colburn Bible. And they describe its last flyby, which was the plagues of Exodus, in extreme detail. Extreme detail. There is nothing, the Egyptians wrote this, and it reads like a man on the street interview. It's very detailed. And, you know, it tells us harbinger signs of what's coming and what will happen. And actually, the interesting thing is the ancient Egyptians are describing 3,600 years ago exactly the things that we're seeing now in the sky. And all of the observation videos that are on YouTube. And, you know, what it says is that this system hides behind the sun, darting in and out. And then suddenly it comes into full view. So, what is this system and how does it come into full view? First off, what you have to understand is that we live in a binary star system. We do not have one sun, we have two suns. And actually, if a recent discovery by the astronomers in Chile is correct, we could be in a trinary sun system where we have three suns. Now, is this common? Yes, 90% of all solar systems in our galaxy have more than one sun. So having one sun is a 1 in 10 chance. So what is the argument for us living in a solar system where we only have one sun? Well, let's look just at what we have with Earth. Our axis is tilted, and relative to the sun, you look at a planet like Uranus, and it's totally tilted, 90 degrees, so that its north pole faces the sun. If you only have one sun, what is causing planets to tilt on their north-south axis? All right? Now, we all have heard the song, if you're my age, you know, and Aquarius, all right, about, you know, we're going in, this is the age of Aquarius, the age of Aquarius. And that was an old song back from the 70s. And very popular in its day. Well, yes, we're going into the age of Aquarius, but we're going backwards into the age of Aquarius, not forwards. And we're doing so at an ever-increasing speed. So there has to be a constant that is used Well, again, if we're in a single star solar system, why are we going backwards into the age of Aquarius instead of going forwards? And why is there a need for an astronomical constant? All right. So if you just look at the different behavioral aspects of our own solar system, you can see that we really do have multiple suns. Now, this sun is a red dwarf. Red dwarfs, as I write about it in my book, Being in It for the Species, are born in great stellar nurseries and go out into space, and they are then attracted into the orbits of larger suns. Now, is there this possibility that you have all of these suns roaming around looking for a place to park themselves? Well, what astronomers are now telling us is that rogue planets, all right, or in this case you could even say a rogue sun, but just rogue planets. All right, let me begin with a general overview of the Planet X system, and then I'll talk about the tribulation process, what's going to happen in what event, in how things are going to unfold. And then I'll talk with you about things that you can begin doing so that you can get through this time. Before I start, what I do want you to know is that where you're located is in a central area in Europe, and actually that is probably one of the more survivable areas on the European continent. So you're in good shape there. The only thing that you're going to really have to worry about will be, people in panic wanting to steal whatever supplies that you have, and some other issues. But I'll get into that in a little bit. First off, let's talk about what is Planet X. And because we always hear a lot of different names for it. We hear Wormwood, we hear Destroyer, Hercolobus, Frightener, several other names. The reason why you have all these names is that there is a good deal of historical